G'day guys, it's Bruno here from the King of All Summoners build, and in this video we're going to go through three things. Firstly, we're going to discuss auras. We're going to discuss the alternate setups between different auras, exactly the pros and cons between each of them, and what you might like to run with when it comes to your auras. Secondly, we're going to talk through the Lethal Pride and Elegant Hubris jewels. So exactly how they work, what they are, and how to use them, and how to decide which one is best for you. And then lastly, I'm going to showcase this new build that I'm currently running with, which provides a great balance between the Jeffrey's Sanctuary tanky version and also the Victoria's Influence high DPS and fast version. So actually I might even start with that. So as you can see here, I am currently running with 7 auras. I'm currently running with Hatred, Aspect of the Avian, Purity of Elements, Pride, Clarity, and Dread Banner. And I also pop Val Haste on bosses. So how exactly are we doing all of this? Well, first things first, what I've done is I have got myself an Ol's Uprising, and this gives some great strength and also helps with our dexterity requirements. But what the thing that really makes this shine is that we get Pride for absolutely free. So Pride reserves no mana. So that's a great instant 20%, 20 to 40% more damage multiplier we get simply from this. Now you might be thinking, okay, well Astramentus gives us a huge amount of attributes in terms of strength and dexterity. Well, what we get using the Saqwal's Nest chest is we get another 70 and upwards of 75 to all attributes. So that gets offset by using this chest. But what's great about this as well is that we also get 10% reduced mana reserved. So that helps with running all of these auras. And as you can see with my tree, I don't even have to take the Sovereignty cluster to do this. So that frees up all of this as well. And I've actually respec'd that and put it over to this influence cluster, which gives us a greater effect of our non-curse auras. And then also with this, we can run Aspect of the Avian and get double the effect of that. So basically we can get a 20% chance for our minions to do double damage and also 40% more minion speed. Now this alternates, as you can see here. So it's currently doing double damage and now it's respect over to more movement speed. But so it's not constantly on for both, but it's a great utility to have when it comes to gaming and mapping and ultimate defense and clearance as well. Sorry, offense and clearance as well. Now, and what I'm running here as well in the chest is Dread Banner, Generosity, which we'll get to shortly, Pride, Hatred, Enlighten, and Haste. And I'm running a pretty offensive tree here. So as you can see with Spirit Offering up, I'm currently at about 10,000 effective hit points, which is on the lower end of using this particular version, because I'm actually going for offense at the moment, so I'm maxing that out. So, but we can get upwards of about 13,000 effective hit points using this variation. And it all depends on what you want to achieve. Do you want more defense or more offense? So I've actually got how Al-Hezmin loaded up and ready to go, and I'm going to show you exactly how this plays out. So I'm just coming in here, Val Pyramid, and this is actually, I haven't actually done a Guardian yet, or a Conqueror I should say, using this particular setup. So this will be my first one, and I'm just going to see how it goes using this DPS version. So just running around, as you can see it's all pretty straightforward. So it's not the greatest map for clearance, as you can see, just because we've got lots of things in the way. But basically your role using this build is to Cyclone to make sure Spirit Offering is up, and then simply just run through packs. So all I'm doing is adding Wither to packs, which gives us extra damage. As much as possible, I try not to Cyclone into packs, just because it slows us down a little bit. And basically just popping Withering Step as much as I can, so we get Phase Run, which enables us to just quickly move through them, and obviously Quicksilver Flask as well. So just kind of running through the packs as much as I can, and with Withering Step you'll slow down because you have an elusive buff which slows you down towards the end, and that's when I start to Cyclone just to make sure my Spirit Offering is constantly up. So we'll just wait to kill this boss. So we can basically just stand here while our minions do do the damage against this Vile Pyramid boss, and then we'll get to Al-Hezmin, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, alright, here we go. So we basically run on in, Cyclone Wood, make sure our Spirit Offering is up, and then we pop our Flask, do Vile Haste, a bit of Withering Step, and just to finish him off, there you go. Oh, fantastic, a Hunter's Exalted Orb. Couldn't be better. Alright, so as you can see, the DPS of that was absolutely phenomenal, and I'm still running with 10,000 effective hit points here, which is great. So what setup is this? So I'm using a Fortify setup with Aspect of the Avian, so that gives me the Avian Aura, as I mentioned. Running with Raise Zombie, Feeding Frenzy, Awaken Minion Damage, Impale, Multi-Strike, and Empower. You saw my chest supports before. Withering Step, Summon Carrying Golem, Maim, and Purity of Elements. So let me jump out and let's talk about these auras for a little bit. So you've got multiple options when it comes to auras. So what I'm running here is a very offensive setup. So your auras basically get classified into two categories. You have offensive auras and you have defensive auras. And so I'm wanting to basically maximize as much damage as I can at the moment, while still having reasonable defense. So I'm pretty happy with 10,000 effective hit points when it comes to defense. But if I wanted to, I could easily get that up to about 13,000 using this setup by swapping a few things around. Now, Dread Banner. Okay, there's often a okay, let me start with offensive auras. So we have Dread Banner and War Banner. There's often a question around, well, what do we use when it comes to Dread Banner and War Banner? Well, Dread Banner, what that gives us is 20% chance to impale and 20% increased impale effect. So if you're running with impale already, this is a great way of scaling that impale damage. And what you want to be doing if you're running with impale as well is really scaling up your attack speed, because the more hits you do, the more impales you inflict on the enemy, and that creates higher impale damage as well. So when you're running with impale, you're running with Dread Banner, and you're linking that with Generosity, which increases the effect of that, you're getting some pretty damn good impale damage there. Now the other alternative is War Banner, and what War Banner does, it increases your accuracy rating, which is not really needed for this build because our zombies already have relatively high accuracy. But the other thing that's really great with War Banner is that it increases physical damage taken by 11%. So it's a good alternative if you're not stacking Impale. So my recommendation would be to use Dread Banner if you're stacking Impale and attack speed. If not, go for War Banner. Now another offensive option is Flesh and Stone. So Flesh and Stone is an interesting gem in that it provides an offensive aura, and it also provides a defensive aura depending on your choice. So the offensive aura is having this in Blood Stance. So when you have Flesh and Stone in Blood Stance, that means that you're increasing the physical damage taken, similar to War Banner. And what you can do with Flesh and Stone while it's in Blood Stance is link that gem with Maim, and that will increase the physical damage even more. So another great offensive option. When it comes to Skitterbots basically shocks and chills enemies. So when we shock enemies, again, we're increasing their damage taken, and when we're chilling enemies, we're slowing their movement speed down, or their action speed as well. So another great offensive aura to use. Now the other big ones that I have in my current setup are Pride. So what Pride gives us is basically more physical damage, as you can see there. So it starts off at 19%, so you're guaranteed to get 19% always. But what happens is it scales up to 39% as enemies stay in the aura for 4 seconds. So basically every second you're getting an extra 5% more damage, which is awesome for bosses. You can really see that start to scale up. Hatred, on the other hand, gives us an extra 25% of physical damage as extra cold damage. So whereas Pride starts at 20%, this gives you 25% consistently, whereas Pride ramps up over time. Because I often see a discussion around, well, what's better, Pride or Hatred? So it depends. So for mapping and general clearance, Hatred will be better because you're getting an extra 5% for trash. But then when it comes to bosses, Pride really shines because it starts to ramp up. Now, here's the kicker. The kicker is when you link these with generosity, because pride doesn't get any benefit from generosity, whereas hatred does. And when hatred gets linked with a level 20 generosity, it has an extra 39 to 40% increased effect. So what does that mean? So that means that hatred, instead of giving 25% of physical damage as extra cold damage, it gives a heck of a lot more. So with hatred, that will then give us 35% more damage. So this would be overall the much better aura to run with, because it's a consistent 35% physical damage, unless you have bosses that are taking 4 seconds or more to take down, which then pride could be equivalent or potentially a little bit better. Haste, on the other hand, so haste is absolutely fantastic, particularly if you're running with Impale as well, because again, we're getting attack speed, and the more times that we can attack and hit enemies, the more impales that we can inflict. So this is again great when it comes to impale and scaling that effectively. Now, in this particular setup, I don't have haste active always. I only just pop Baal haste on the bosses, so we're getting a huge amount of increased effect on the bosses, which is awesome. So that is basically a summary of the various offensive auras that we have, because the only one I haven't spoken about is Aspect of the Avian. Actually, no, I did mention that earlier, didn't I? Where we had the chance to do double damage, and also it increases movement speed. Now, the defensive auras that we have, so I am running with Purity of Elements, which obviously gives us increased elemental resistances. So with this build, capping elemental resistances can be hard, because we're using so many different uniques that don't give increased elemental resistances, which leaves us with only a few slots, basically our ring slots and our belt slot, and also our jewels to be able to cap those resistances. So Purity of Elements is really handy for this build. Another option is Discipline. So Discipline just really supercharges our energy shield. So that can add about an extra 1,000 to 1,500 energy shield, which is a great way of stacking further defense. Also, we can run with Determination. If you're running with an armor chest, this could be great if you're stacking armor. So an example of what that might look like is this chest here. So I have an armor chest here, which gives almost 900 armor with lots of resistances, another raised zombie, and some strength as well. So if I could be running with this chest and using Determination with that would be a great option, because I'd just be stacking my armor really, really effectively. Another defensive aura that we could use is Grace. So Grace stacks on evasion for us, and this is we don't really need this in our build for general mapping and bossing, but it comes in very handy when it comes to delving. So delving, you really want to start to prioritize defense. Flesh and Stone in Sand Stance. So when we have Sand Stance on, people that come within a radius of you, they're blinded, which basically means that they have less accuracy and then will hit you less often. Also, you take less damage from enemies that aren't nearby, so aren't in your radius. So basically from projectile hits and things like that, and long-ranged hits, you take less damage, which can be useful as well. And that's basically it when it comes to the defensive auras. And then we have curses. So curses, vulnerability obviously increases physical damage taken from enemies. Despair increases chaos damage taken by enemies. Punishment is a great one. This gives more melee physical damage to your minions, but the kicker, what needs to happen for that to occur is your minions need to be hit. So they need to be hit first, and then they actually do 35% more physical damage, which is absolutely huge. This is great for bossing. I mean, if you stack this on on a Sirius, for example, or potentially even Conquerors, that can really ramp up your damage for it. Enfeeble is a defensive curse that you can use, which makes nearby enemies, it makes you take less damage, which is a great defensive option. Really, really good if you're wanting to, stack defense, but also if you're delving. And similarly with Temporal Chains, it slows the action speed of enemies. So your job with this build is to find what's the best balance for you. What are you trying to achieve? Are you really trying to stack as much DPS as possible, and you're comfortable with, say, 10,000 effective hit points like I'm running right now? Or would you like to be a little bit more tanky and you don't like dying so much? So if that's the case, you probably want to swap out some of these things, and you may want to run with Purity of Elements and Discipline as an example. Or you might even want to throw in a run in Flesh and Stone in Sand Stance as well for some extra defense. Some other options that we have here as well is Baal Molten Shell. Molten Shell is great for stacking on even more armor, and you can swap that in for Maim that we have in the gloves. You could also run with, I'll talk about these ones differently, but you could also swap in Chaos Golem, which grants 4% additional physical damage reduction as opposed to Carrion Golem. So there's multiple different variations that you can run. So what I'm doing here is a very, very offensive setup. As you saw from the video, we basically took down the Hunter in a split second, just after he phased. And so the way that I'm doing that is I am running with my Elegant Hubris Jewel here. So my Elegant Hubris Jewel gives me 240% increased damage. So I've got a Slumlord here, which gives me minions deal 80% increased damage, another one over here, and one here, which is a perfect location for this particular jewel because it's on the pathing all the way down here to Utmost Might. The thing about Elegant Hubris jewels, they provide some great nodes. As you can see, 240% increased damage is massive, but it comes at a cost. So the cost is that everything else in the radius is null and void. It's the price of glory that you have to pay. So all these other little nodes that we take along the way are null and void. So all I'm getting from this little area is 240% increased minion damage. Now, an alternative of what I may want to do is, if I wanted to get more defense, is I could take this out and I could instead run a Lethal Pride. So if I swap these over, put my Watcher's Eye back down here, and I put my Lethal Pride here, what the Lethal Pride does is it adds additional mods to each of your nodes. So as you can see here, all of these pathing nodes, I'm getting additional strength. So if you're looking to stack strength, this is an absolutely fantastic option. So you're getting strength from all of these, and then I have some increased strength nodes. So for example here, Righteous Army, I'm getting 5% increased strength, and Redemption, I'm getting 5% increased strength. I actually have another one over here as well for 5% increased strength, so I could have 15%, but it's for me it is too many nodes, too many skill points for me to use to reach that, so it's not really worth it. And it's this way it's just easy for me to flick and change between the two. And then the good thing about that is, if I wanted to stack more defense, what I could do as well is swap in Discipline over Purity of Elements. And what we're doing here is basically, so if I wait for my mana to get back up, and you can see just how that changes my defense overall. So okay, so we've got Discipline up. Now you can see with Spirit Offering up, now I'm getting just over 12,000 effective hit points just by those two simple changes. I basically put in a Lethal Pride and I'm running with a Discipline now. So I'm still getting some fantastic DPS because I'm still running with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and Baal Haste, so 7 auras, which is awesome, and a very offensive skill tree, and I'm still getting 12,000 effective hit points. This could be another great option for me. And I've also got almost hitting 15,000 strength as well. So what I could do is tweak my tree a little bit more. So for example, take Might and get some more strength, and do a couple of other things which could help me get some more strength and hit that 15,000 mark. Now the other thing that I've done here with this tree is I'm using a Thread of Hope jewel here, so in a medium ring. And now this works really, really well because the only nodes that we really want to take here within this area is Ravenous Horde, and also potentially this one here, Cruel Preparation. So 10% increased life and 5% to all elemental resistances. Now I just didn't have a skill point free to allocate that, otherwise I would. But I could, take a skill point off somewhere else. So for example, a damage node, if I wanted more resistances and life, and put it there, depending on what's the balance that I want to go for when it comes to offense or defense. So what that means is we have Death Attunement allocated all the way up here. We have Ravenous Horde allocated all by itself over here. We could potentially have Cruel Preparation allocated all by itself here, and that frees up a ton of skill points that we can then allocate elsewhere. So as you can see, I have moved my Efficient Training Jewel that was there to over here. So I've got my Efficient Training Jewel in this lower corner. And then up here, I've also added in a Brawn Jewel to help me with my Dexterity, and also 1% reduced mana reserved. But then also just really kind of getting the biggest effect from my auras as well. So 4% reduced mana reservation, which you will need to run all of these auras. And then also getting an extra 20% increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. And we don't have any curse auras from our skills. So those 7 auras are all non-curse. So we're really, really amplifying that. That also enables me to then bring up these skill points. I've got Enduring Bond allocated. I've also got Spiritual Command allocated. And I've also come over and taken this jewel and moved my Emperor's Mastery over here, with also stacking some increased armor. So there's so much more that we can do with this tree by using this Thread of Hope jewel. It's absolutely fantastic, and this is working really, really well. So I think I might add this build and version to the guide as an official guide, because I think it's a perfect balance between a tanky Jeffrey's Sanctuaries version. So Jeffrey's Sanctuary, you can get between 13 and 17,000 effective hit points. With this version, you'll get between 10 on the lower end, if you're running with an offensive setup, to about 13,000 effective hit points if you're running with a defensive setup. Whereas the Victaria Sanctuary, you're probably running with about a 7,000 effective hit points on the low end, up to 10,000 on the high end. So that basically gives you a bit of a flavor as to the differences between the setups. So Victaria's gives more DPS than what we just saw in this video, but as you can see here, the DPS was still absolutely amazing. So there's no real need to go for the speed unless you really want to smash through maps very, very quickly, which is a great option, or for fun, taking down bosses extremely quickly. So it's up to you which one you want to go for, but this setup is working really, really well. Now, let me just go back over the Lethal Pride and Elegant Hubris a little bit more and talk about exactly how they work. So I mentioned Lethal Pride before, how it adds a different mods to each of the nodes. Now, as you can see here, the top line says commanded leadership over 16 770 warriors under Kilowava. Now, your Lethal Pride jewel will have a different number. And so every Lethal Pride is different in the game. So there's something like 40,000 different combinations that you could potentially have with your Lethal Pride. So your Lethal Pride won't have the exact same attributes that mine does. It will give something different. So what you need to do is you need to find a Lethal Pride that works for you. So what you want to do is buy the cheapest Lethal Pride that you can find, and then use a Divine Orb. I don't have any Divine Orbs with me now, but if you use a Divine Orb, then that will change Lethal Pride. And basically what you want to do is then stick that new one back into your tree and just kind of see just what mods does it give you. And you want to make sure that the mods don't cost too many skill points to get there. So this Lethal Pride is absolutely perfect for me, even though it's only 10% increased strength. It's already on the nodes that I would take for this build anyway. So it's just an absolute perfect addition to this build. Whereas the Elegant Hubris, as you can see, it's a little bit more tricky because the Elegant Hubris removes all the other mods. You don't really want to have it in a location such as here, where it will remove all these important mods that we already have for our build, because that means all of these mods here, so these increases attack speed, we don't have. And these other ones, see, that's been changed to lightning resistance. This has been changed to 15% increased effect of non-curse auras. This has been changed to increased damage, and this has been changed to increased skill effect duration. So I could like play around with these and see what could be what might be useful for me. But as you can see, just simply changing, slotting that into a different location gives different mods onto the skill tree. So I'm not sure if I explained that the best, but anyway, that gives you a bit of a flavour as to Lethal Pride. So yes, your Lethal Pride will be different unless you can find one that has the exact same number as on my jewel. That's going to be very unlikely. So you want to just kind of play around and see which nodes are good for you. So one thing I do want to discuss is generosity. So generosity is an amazing support. We obviously use level 30 generosity with our Victario's influence chest, and that's really the kind of the key difference when it comes to Victario's and this version of the build. Because with this version, we're obviously only getting a level 20 generosity, whereas a Victario's gives level 30, which enables us to just stack our damage even further. But this level 20 generosity is pretty damn good. So what this does is it means that supported auras do not affect us. So when it comes to our own damage, so when it comes to pride and hatred and things like that, we're not getting the benefit of that. Also when it comes to, that means when it comes to haste, we're not getting the added movement speed or attack speed or anything like that. It's all just applied to our minions. This is why we don't want to put defensive auras linked with generosity. So if we put a discipline or a purity of elements as an example with generosity, that would be applied to our minions and it would not be applied to us. So that's why discipline and purity of elements is outside here. And then, but the other big thing with generosity is that, as I mentioned before, so you're increasing the effect of all of your auras. So we're getting a 40% increased effect of Dread Banner, a 40% increased effect of Hatred, 40% increased effect of Haste, so which is pretty damn epic. And we're also scaling that even further in our skill tree, so an extra 6% increased effect here and an extra 14%, so another extra 20% increased effect. So we're really scaling these 7 auras that we've got, and also aspect of the avian there as well, and we're getting the benefits of discipline and or purity of elements, whatever you decide to choose. And keep in mind, we can also throw in for a really offensive option skitterbots into the mix as well. So we could throw in skitterbots and just go pure DPS and literally just start to melt things super quickly. And then you could do things like what I did in one of my previous videos using the Umbilicus Immortalis belt, where you just start to shred the bosses within 2 seconds. And so there's many different options for this. And this is definitely a tankier version than the Victario's. But it does come at a cost, obviously, with not being able to have the higher attributes, which potentially may mean that you won't be able to run with the speed belt without losing lots of your strength. But there's multiple options. You can mix and match depending on whatever you want to achieve with the build. The other thing I want to quickly discuss is, because somebody asked a question around phase run versus withering step and which is better. So they both give movement speed and they both give phasing, which basically means that you won't be stopped by monsters and obstacles, monsters, enemies. You can just basically run through them. The difference is that you get an extra 48% increased movement speed up to 50% with phase run, which is hugely fast, and that's just consistent. So it's a consistent pace over the period of time that you have the buff, which is 1.8 seconds. With Withering Step, on the other hand, is you're applying Wither to enemies as you run through them. So what this means is for each Wither that you put on an enemy, that enemy takes 6% increased chaos damage. And now we're getting chaos damage from our spirit offering. So we're getting an extra 30% of our physical damage as extra chaos damage. And then this scales that even further. So we're doing more damage when it comes to that. But so you might be asking, well, why wouldn't everybody use Withering Step? Well, it depends on just personally your playstyle again, because Withering Step has a couple downfalls, because obviously it would be best in slot, which for this build I believe it's best in slot, but it comes down to personal preference. So the downside, I guess, is that the elusive buff that you get, which is the movement speed and also dodge chance, that decreases over time. So when you first use Withering Step, you're very fast and you have high dodge chance, but then over time, so over the 3 seconds that it lasts, 3 or 4 seconds, it decreases. So you kind of have this burst of pace and then you slow down. You have this burst of pace and then you slow down. So it's not as consistent as a Withering Step, but you do provide more damage as well. So so it's up to you exactly what you want to achieve with your own preference and playstyle. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you got some great value. As you can see, just to wrap it up, I'm running with 15 zombies at the moment. I'm actually running with 4 specters, and those specters currently being one Carnage Chieftain, 1 Host Chieftain, 1 Ruins Hellion for defense, and 1 Undying Evangelist for extra defense as well. I found now that running with just 1 Carnage and 1 Host Chieftain is enough when it comes to keeping our frenzy charges and power charges up. So I would recommend just having 1 of each and then choosing a defensive option as well. And Ruins Hellions and Undying Evangelists are great options. And as you can see here, my strength with this particular setup, with my offensive setup, is over 12,000. But then if I'm going for a more defensive setup, so scaling my energy shield and my effective hit points, looking to get to around $13,000 or $14,000. 13 or 14,000 effective hit points, I'd be getting up to 15,000, so I'll be able to break that 15,000 threshold, getting to 16 zombies, but still keeping all of these auras as well. So many different options for you guys. So hopefully this kind of, my goal with this is to help you understand just the differences between, and the pros and cons between your options, because there's no best option that's set in stone. It really comes down to your own preference and playstyle. If you're happy with a little bit less defense and going for more damage, or if you want more damage, if you're happy to take with a little bit less damage but go for more defense, it's totally up to you. And there's a few different options you can do with your gear, with your gems, and with the skill tree itself. So hopefully this is educating you a little bit so you can make your own choices when it comes to the build. And if you do make any cool alternatives or changes to the build, I'd love to know. Share them in the thread so we can all see what you guys are doing. Awesome, guys. Thanks for that. Hope you got some value, and I'll speak to you soon.